Would the people who are having coffee like to come to hear what Daniel has to say? Yeah, come, join us, join in. Okay, the new series on Talks to St Giles are starting today, and it's starting off with someone you may know, you may not know. But Daniel has come to be with us as our associate priest in this benefice, and I asked him to put this series together. And he volunteered to do the first talk. Welcome, Daniel. Let's hear what he's got to say.
Now, it's almost very loud, isn't it? Shall I move it? So this is the first talk of the programme. I think volume turned down. Is that better? There we go. Is that a bit better? Okay. That sounds okay, comfortable. Good. So the talks we have are called Prayer in Our World, and they're relating to various issues in our modern world and how prayer can help us engage with that. And I should say that running kind of alongside this and published by our sister church at St Margaret's in North Oxford, we have a series of weekly and daily reflections by email on how we might approach prayer in our own lives. So do check out St Margaret's website or social media accounts if you're interested in that. And if you want to know the rest of the talks in this programme, you might have seen posters online or around, but if not, some flyers like this just at the back of the church, and you take one of those, and it's got information on the website as well with more details. In relation to today's talk then, my own background, the reason I'm doing this talk, before I came into ministry, my professional background was in education and web development and e-learning. And even though I was an arts student, I did history as an undergrad, I've always been interested in technology, and especially how humans relate to technology. And as such, the research that this talk is kind of loosely based on was that undertaken for my master's thesis when I was training for ministry a few years ago. But to start this talk, I want to go further back still. In the mid-1990s, I was choosing what options I would be taking for my GCSEs. Apart from the compulsory maths and English and science, I definitely wanted history, of course. I've been brought up in a family of Francophiles, so French was my obvious choice for a language. I just formed a rock band with my friends, so I had to do GCSE music, and this left one wild card. So I decided to go for religious studies. "Ah, you loser," said my so-called friends. "There's no point doing religious studies unless you want to be a vicar." "Don't be ridiculous," I indignantly replied. "I'm just interested in the big questions. There's no way I'm going to become a vicar." But it turns out that too many people thought like my friends did, and there weren't enough takers to justify the course running that year. So in a mad panic, and with a solid background as a computer geek, I decided that my final option would be ICT. And if you don't know what that stands for, it's Information and Communications Technology. Now, for some reason, I can really clearly remember thinking that was a stupid name, both for the GCSE and for the discipline as a whole. Yes, you could store information on a computer in a database, and you could, in theory, use a painfully slow modem to plug your PC into your telephone line and communicate with other computers. But to be honest, it was probably cheaper and quicker to just send a letter by Royal Mail. And this was 1995, and I was 14 years old. I didn't even know anyone with a modem. Let's be honest, information and communication weren't the exciting bits about computers for us geeks raised on our Sinclair ZX Spectrums and our Commodore Amigas. Apart from the computer games, of course, there was programming, creating blocky images, composing beepy music, writing letters with lots of different fonts and colours. Who cared about information or communication? Well, fast forward about 25 years, and that name suddenly seems very prescient. The explosion of the internet and related technologies since that time has completely transformed both how we approach and handle information and also how we communicate with one another. And ironically, ICT isn't actually a term we're likely to use to describe our internet smartphone revolution. In fact, ICT is a term nowadays we're not likely to use at all outside of the context of, my PC won't print again, where's the ICT department when you need them? And when I say it's transformed how we communicate and access and share information, obviously it's not uniform across our society. Age is a big factor, as is social class, educational attainment, but nevertheless there is a very clear trend and it's only pointed in one direction. But what, you may be thinking, does any of this have to do with prayer? I want to answer that by way of another question. What, as human beings, distinguishes us from the rest of creation, from all of the other creatures that we share this planet with? And various answers can be given to that, but two related responses might be the ability that we have to communicate to the depth and the complexity that we do, and our ability to learn by processing information. Information and communication technology, therefore, is profoundly human technology. It cuts straight to the heart of what it means to be human. And so, of course, to the person of faith, does prayer. Prayer is a fundamentally human activity. It's a means of establishing a relationship between the human and the divine. Part of the role of Jesus Christ, God incarnate, as a human being, was to teach us to pray. Prayer is not for God's benefit. It's not something which charges him up and gives him power. Prayer is for our benefit. It allows God to work in us and through us, aligning our wills to his, transforming ourselves and subsequently transforming the world around us. Well, how does God transform us through lives of prayer? I want to suggest three basic ways. Firstly, God transforms our own sense of who we are, our self-identity. It's only through this that we can come to view ourselves, to understand ourselves as children of God, created in his image. What does this mean? It means for the one who has a prayer-filled relationship with God, that there is such a thing as human nature. We're not just to be reduced to our base evolutionary instincts, covered up with millennia of social conditioning. In presence of and in relationship with the God who creates us, who sustains us, who redeems us, who loves us, to be a human being isn't just an accident. It means something. And one of the insights afforded only by a life of prayer is that this human nature, our human nature, is a gift born out of God's abundant grace. Our very existence is a gracious, unwarranted gift. It does not need to be anything at all, but there is in all its beauty and wonder and awe, and it's out of that overflowing grace that our human nature is founded. And prayer doesn't only present us with the concept of a human nature, it creates a dynamic through which we draw closer to the person of Jesus Christ. As Moltmann put it, the truly human person set amidst our inhumanity. In Christ we have a model of what a fully realised human nature, a human nature which is not being clouded by sin, might truly look like. And it's only through the relationship forged by prayer that we can move forward in realising that for ourselves. In modern speak, prayer helps us to become more truly ourselves, to be more fully what we really are. So, prayer transforms our sense of self-identity, grounded as it is for the prayer in our relationship with God. And that leads us on to the second way in which God transforms us, the way that we relate not only to ourselves or to God, but to other people. Prayer itself is, of course, based on a relationship with God. And that tells us something about this human nature we've just been discussing. Human beings are created to be in relationship. In the first instance with God, and subsequently with each other. It's not good for man to be alone. In presence, we often think of our vertical relationship to God as being pretty tangential to our horizontal relationship with other people. I mean, we might pray to God for other people, especially if they're sick or in need, but a lot of the time, that's about it. But again, that's a very narrow view of what prayer is. If prayer is understood as a means of receiving God's grace, which is perhaps why the Eucharist is sometimes called the highest form of prayer, then in fact all of our relationships with other people can be understood as prayer. As Rana puts it, human relationships not only serve as a primary metaphors for grace, they also serve as the primary carriers of grace, the primary ways grace is expressed and becomes effective in human life. Our relationships with, our openness to the world, to other human beings, this openness reflects our very creation as an act of grace by the God who wants to be in relationship with us. And if that is how we understand human relationships, then how we approach them is itself transformed. Christ, the fully realized human being, the exact image of God who is in perfect relationship with him, refused to engage at any level with what Martin Buber calls an I-it relationship with the other. Christian prayer has always included within it reflection on Christ's words and actions in Scripture, and what that reveals to us of God. And the distinctive quality of Christ's nature in the Gospels is his consistent recognition of the humanity of the person he is addressing, even when no one around him shared that recognition. And the other side of that is consistent refusal to make use of the other as a means to a further end. So, a life of prayer has the potential to transform our self-identity and our relationality. The third and final one is our sense of human freedom. Now, prayer often seems like the opposite of freedom. As Christians, it often feels like an extra chore that we either have to endure or feel guilty about. Again, that's based on a very narrow understanding of prayer. Prayer, as I've already suggested, is fundamentally about a relationship with the one who not only created us, but is involved with our lives as individuals, as communities, as a global species. And the central insight, which we can only really find through prayer, often triggered by external crises in our own lives, is that we are utterly dependent upon God at the most existential level. We are because God wills us to be. Now, to our modern ears, dependence sounds like the exact opposite of freedom. In fact, it gives us the opportunity to view the freedom that we undoubtedly all possess, to think, to act, to react, to love, as a gift. And this fundamental freedom, rooted in God, gives us the freedom to create, to imagine. And going back to our earlier point, it's grounded in our human nature as the image of God, the God who delights in his own creativity, the one who created human beings and all of the cosmos and declared, "It is good." For some contemporary thinkers, the very idea of a human nature is antithetical to human freedom. We decide our nature for ourselves. The idea of a true self is nonsense. There are just the selves, and usually it is plural, that we each choose to create. The idea that in Jesus Christ we have a picture of what a fully realized human being looks like, a human being who is fully free because he knows at the deepest level who he is. That idea simply doesn't make sense if human nature is dismissed as a concept. And yet, from a Christian perspective, ignoring our own human nature and acting in conflict with it is the opposite of freedom. It's a violation of freedom, as we're just setting ourselves, against our own true nature. So there's three ways in which prayer transforms us: our self-identity in the presence of God, our relationality with human beings, and our own human freedom. Now, a life of prayer can take many forms. I'm not here to advocate a particular way of praying, but whatever form it takes, it's not something that happens by accident. It's something that we have to be intentional about, finding a pattern that works in our own lives. And without that intentionality in prayer, we cannot hope to be transformed by God. And yet, even without consciously trying, just by growing up and living in a society, we do develop an understanding of ourselves as human beings, including those three dimensions of self-identity, of freedom, of relationality. For many people, that understanding may be unreflective, it may be uncritical, but nevertheless, it's there. And one of the main factors which influences our understanding are the forms of technology that we use, particularly, but not only, those forms of technology that we use to communicate with one another and to learn and to process information. Now, of course, technology itself is morally neutral. A piece of technology does not in itself have a view about what it means to be human. It can't, it's an inanimate object. But technology, by definition, is constructed by human beings. Usually, it is developed for a particular purpose. Later, it may be marketed for quite a different purpose. But the people developing it, the people justifying the time and effort and money it will take to develop it, and the people trying to persuade us that we need this technology in our lives, they are all people. They are people, usually forming part of wider organisations, which have their own character and their own agenda, and they're operating in specific social contexts, specific economic contexts, and specific political contexts. So it's worth exploring those contexts just a little bit. Now, the internet generally became accessible to the general public from around the mid-1990s onwards, around the same time I was doing my ICT GCSE, in fact. But it began much earlier as a research network, a series of computers connected together, associated with the US military in the 1960s. That was its roots. Its big innovation was that it had no central hub, so it was a lot more robust to nuclear attack. If one part of the network was destroyed, the rest of the network could carry on. That was its big new thing. That was why it was exciting and different. So originally it was known as ARPANET, but its remit began to expand. And by the early 1980s, this network had developed into a more general scientific research network, not just military related. It was renamed NSFNet. It's still largely confined to the US. Then over the course of the 1980s, it started to embrace other academic disciplines, the humanities, the social sciences, as well as expanding geographically to other developed nations, particularly Western Europe during that decade. And it became increasingly accessible as well to individuals outside academic institutions. So it's a pretty rapid growth, but there's one curiosity. Commercial activity was actually prohibited on the network until the early 1990s. Totally banned. Can you imagine an internet in which making money wasn't allowed? And that was the case until the 1990s. And what actually happened, without getting too technical about it, is you had all these smaller commercial networks which were kind of separate but linked, springing up, almost becoming a parallel network, until finally the US government gives in and in effect sells off the internet to private owners, which then subsumes everything else within it. And the rest of the history is a lot better known. The Amazons, the Googles, the Facebooks of this world, the creation of internet advertising, and the transformation of the internet experience from something you have to sit down at your desk to access to something you access by just getting out your phone from your pocket. So you kind of have these two histories. But what's interesting is that the original vision of the internet, a place of cooperation for research and learning, was never completely lost despite the commercialization. It continues today as a sort of alternative internet. It's exemplified by something like Wikipedia or the free software movement. That's a kind of non-commercial, in fact positively anti-commercial ethos of collaborative software engineering based on the sharing of code and design ideas via the internet. And I think, although I am hugely simplifying things, that these two distinct histories of the internet can be associated with two distinct understandings, two distinct visions of what it means to be human. So what I want to do for the rest of the talk is just do a quick survey of how each of those three aspects that we looked at before, the self-identity, relationality, our human freedom, how each of these have understood and have been understood by these two internet-related philosophies of humanity. And just for the sake of clarity, I'm going to refer to the dominant internet culture prevalent today and the alternative internet culture, with its roots in that earlier vision of what the internet was for. So let's start this time with human freedom. I know it's not very fashionable anymore, but I still find Isaiah Berlin's famous distinction between negative and positive freedom helpful here. Negative freedom, the kind of freedom where I can do whatever I want as long as no one else is stopping me. Freedom of speech, freedom to assemble and demonstrate, freedom to practice my religion, freedom to watch what I want, or read what I want, or listen to what I want. Now, it seems to me that this is the understanding of human freedom which is really being propagated by the dominant internet culture, and it expresses itself in various ways. The automatic assumption of the absolute and inviolable right to freedom of speech or expression, and the correlating abhorrence of anything which resembles censorship. Freedom to choose or to personalise, choose which apps are on your smart device and how they're arranged, choose which categories of news you want to read about or ignore on your favourite newspaper site, choose a theme for your web-based email client. The freedom to consume, online stores selling physical goods with a far wider variety of choice than any bricks and mortar shop could ever stock. Streaming services offering far more music to listen to, or films and TV programs to watch than we ever could have had access to before. In opposition to this negative freedom, Berlin outlined a positive freedom. Positive freedom is the freedom to realise myself. But I can't do that just by myself. It needs to be enabled for me. For example, there may be no law or coercive power stopping me from having a good education, but unless I have the means to access it, it's meaningless to say that I'm free to be educated. And I think this sort of freedom was, or is, implied in that alternative culture of the internet. Freedom is understood, at least in part, as self-realisation in terms of greater understanding of the world, part of that academic ideal. In a world in which the proto-internet in the 60s and 70s and 80s was limited to, when it was limited to effectively professional scientists and later other academics, the focus wasn't merely or even primarily concerned with individual self-realisation, but a sort of collective self-realisation. The freedom and potential of humanity as a whole might be increased. That was the ideal. And this ideal may continue to exist in today's internet, although in its primary form it's become rather more privatised and individualised in the form of self-improvement for ourselves or our families. And the promise of the internet to allow us to maximise our potential by providing access for ordinary citizens to information, and knowledge, and experiences which would simply otherwise be impossible. That still lives on. And the collective ideal does also live on, though perhaps less notably in terms of scientific or general academic progress, which may still exist, of course, within and across academic institutions, so much as social, political, or environmental activism, in terms of new ways of making connections between varying movements and ideas. Now, if through prayer we understand and appreciate the freedom that we have as gift, not entitlement, and furthermore as one directed towards a particular end, the worship of God and the admiration of all his creation, including our fellow sisters and brothers before God, it is not hard to see that the understanding of human freedom offered by the dominant internet culture is hugely lacking. And the problem with freedom as entitlement is that you need someone to enforce your entitlements. And while proponents of negative freedom may look to private enterprise and a reduced role for the state, the tendency towards monopoly power, the ever-tightening grip of a few tech giants, Google, Amazon, Facebook, Apple, we've had the odd situation where internet activists have had to recourse to appealing to the state in order to limit and regulate the powers that online services have with regard to users' personal information, with varying degrees of success, as anyone will know who had to deal with the European GDPR legislation. Human freedom, conceived in terms of entitlement and negative rights, is shown to be very precarious. It can only be protected from one potential threat by appealing to another authority of equal or greater power. And the freedom promised by the dominant culture of the internet, the freedom to do as we will without any particular end or goal, has a practical impact on a different level. The extent to which the internet acts as a distraction for many people has become an increasingly discussed phenomenon. Alerts and notifications from our smart devices encouraging this distraction even further, triggering a basic neurological stimulus response in individuals, even to the extent of permanent change in behaviour. Indeed, there are various apps growing in popularity in recent years that a user can install to prevent, or at least limit, him or herself from idly web browsing, and they should be doing something more productive. And one of the most popular of these is named, ironically, Freedom. The name of another one, called Cold Turkey, highlights the almost addictive nature of internet usage. Now, the more positive freedom of the alternative internet culture, this ideal of a personal or collective self-realization, might seem a better fit for our understanding of prayer. And yet, another one of the key insights that we learn through prayer, and again I want to say it's only through prayer that we can ever appreciate this at a deep guts level, is that dependence upon God I mentioned before. By exercising our freedom to realize ourselves without that external referent of God, we humans always run the risk of asserting our own self-autonomy over and against God. If prayer is understood as aligning our wills with God, then this is the opposite, asserting our wills against God's. And Christian theologians, of course, have a word for that: sin. So that's human freedom. Let's look at how these internet cultures relate to self-identity. It's become an increasingly accepted idea in the contemporary Western culture within which the internet developed, that human nature is an artificial, social, or cultural construct. Yes, we share with animals those basic biological impulses for food, procreation, sleep, exercise, and so on. But beyond that, it's a given that it's not only your right, but in fact your very responsibility to create yourself and then represent that self to others. Now this isn't new in itself. For a long time, advertisers have encouraged us to buy stuff that we don't need by imbibing those products with certain values in their marketing and then encouraging us to express our identity by buying those products from them. Online advertising is simply an intensification of this. But the construction of self-identity online goes beyond that. In the early years of the public commercial internet, those few who communicated online tended to do so on discussion boards centred around a shared hobby or interest, and these discussions would often be anonymised. Cyber Warrior 7241 applied to your host. But in modern social media, users are encouraged, in the case of Facebook, required now to use our real names and photos to make a direct link between our online personas and our real world selves. And other people who we know or are acquainted with in the real world are therefore able to make observations and judgments about us. And so the creation and presentation and management of self-identity is an inherent part of social media usage. Depending on our audience, we carefully choose particular elements of our lives to draw attention to or divert attention from, according to how we want to be seen. The doting parent, the successful business person, the rebellious activist, the quirky creative type, or whatever else. And self-identity is not just about how we try to get others to see us, but about how we see ourselves. The internet makes it easy and low cost and low effort for us to affiliate ourselves to a whole range of social, cultural, political, religious groups and movements, whether publicly, informally on our social media feed, or privately and informally by just browsing and reading. And just as the internet opens up a huge range of content for us, it also narrows it back down for us through what's been named the filter bubble effect. Over time, as the algorithms get to know us, our search results in Google are tailored to our browsing history, as are suggested stories in Facebook and the links offered by those we follow on Twitter. The purpose of engineering the public face of the internet in this way, and it has been very carefully engineered, is to serve the desire of advertisers to most easily reach their target audiences. But the impact that it has on internet users reaches far beyond commercial purposes. For those committed to a life of prayer, the idea of a created self-identity which either rejects or just ignores any sense of created, God-given human nature is, of course, hugely problematical. It's also individualized to the point of being atomistic, which we'll think about more in just a moment. Now, the alternative internet culture does have certain differences. It has an understanding of self-identity, I would argue, which is grounded in commitment to certain normative or even ethical values. Historically, engagement, as we've seen with the internet, would only have been possible for those with a certain commitment to academic, scientific ideals, such as the freedom of information, the critical assessment of new theories and data, and the value of collaboration and developing knowledge on the back of the work of others. Obviously, such commitment is no longer required for users of today's open internet. But the internet still facilitates the development of moral identity by enabling the creation of networks of people based on shared values, typically connected to political, philosophical, or religious movements. And yet, like the dominant internet culture, it is still predicated on us choosing, at some level, our own self-identity, our own human nature. It's based on a kind of Pelagian optimism that humans, on an individual or a collective basis, are by pure force of will able, by themselves, to consistently act in a way that is wholly in keeping with their chosen ethical identity. This is a burden which is impossible to bear for any human being. If nothing else, prayer is an opportunity for us to receive God's acceptance of us, and thus to accept ourselves despite all the mistakes and mess-ups we make on a daily basis. There is an honesty about prayer, true prayer, which social media simply cannot afford. So, human freedom and self-identity sorted. Our third and final category is relationality. One of the most obvious consequences of online technologies is a significantly reduced level of physical face-to-face contact with others, both in terms of quantity and quality. We're not necessarily talking here about deep, close relationships, but the basic social glue which enables us to feel integrated into a local community. For example, in many towns, the high street, or once vital centre of local community, has been decimated, as many of the errands for which it was once necessary to be physically present can now be done more quickly and easily online. But it does have an offline impact upon close and significant relationships as well, both at professional and personal level. Whether at meetings or lectures, at home with family members or with close friends, it's increasingly common for individuals to only be partly present to the other and partly engage with a smart device, whether communicating with others on social media or just browsing the web. And there's also the well-known effect that people often behave very differently online. This can be in a positive way. For example, an individual who is not socially confident or who suffers from a disability may have possibilities open to him or her that would not otherwise exist. But it's also the case that people are often more aggressive and even abusive online than they might be in person. In this dominant internet culture, we've not only rejected a shared human dignity based on a shared human nature, but now our empathy is reduced and we don't pick up on the subtle face-to-face cues that might indicate when our words and actions are causing distress. We also now have a far greater expectation of availability and connectivity with other people to suit our own needs, and an accompanying frustration when those expectations are not met. Precursors to that might have been first the landline, and then later the mobile telephone, but it's the innovation of text-based messaging services, increasingly internet-based, coupled with the widespread availability of our portable internet devices, which has solidified this trend. And what all those points share is an instrumental view of others, a view of others as a means to an end, a view of others which, as we saw earlier, Jesus explicitly and consistently condemned, and which is incompatible with a life of prayer. So that concludes my whistle-stop survey. Of course, a lot more could be said, and in a moment, if anyone wants to develop or challenge anything I've said, then please feel free. But I just want to emphasise that this isn't an attempt to make anyone feel guilty. I'm certainly not saying the internet or smartphones or social media are sinful and wicked, so please don't get that idea. But they do present real and significant challenges to our lives of prayer, and therefore to how we relate to God, how we relate to others, and how we relate to ourselves. I don't think we do ourselves any favour by denying those challenges. I believe it's only by naming them, becoming aware of them, that we have any hope of avoiding the pitfalls they present, and instead allow ourselves to use them in a loving and faithful and hope-filled way, challenging, in turn, these anemic understandings of what it might mean to be a human. Thank you for listening.